Okay, today we pick up with the last Tsar. And the last Tsar of Russia, his name is Nicholas II, and he is very easily influenced. He loves luxury, so he likes the nice, cushy lifestyle, but he's also fairly ignorant about his people. His wife is Alexandria, and she's basically the same kind of personality as her husband, but she's also a German princess, just like Catherine the Great was, came in and married a Russian Tsar. Alexandria is going to follow the cult of Rasputin, and Rasputin is a peasant who sets up this religious cult, and the reason he becomes important to Alexandria is because of her and Nicholas's son, Alexis. And they had several daughters, but Alexis was their only son, so here's the next Tsar. He's going to be the next Tsar. But he's a hemophiliac, and hemophiliacs have problems with their blood clotting. And so there was a good likelihood that he would not make it to adulthood. Now, hemophiliacism is something that is passed down through genetics, and both the German side and the Russian side had it, and so it kind of comes together in poor Alexis, and he's the one who kind of gets the brunt of it. But basically any minor injury could turn into something life-threatening for him because of his condition. Even just a fall off of his bicycle or down the stairs or just getting a typical cuts and bruises that a kid gets could prove to be life-threatening for him and could end his life. So Rasputin, who wants power, is going to come in, and he actually does save Alexis's life on several different occasions. And what is believed is that he hypnotizes him to slow down his heart rate, and so if his blood isn't pumping as fast, like if a kid knows he has this condition and he falls down, he knows that he could possibly die, so his heart's probably going to be racing. And so Rasputin probably comes in and gives him or puts him under hypnosis and slows down that heart rate to allow his blood time to actually stop flowing so much and give him time to heal. So, like I said, he does actually save Alexis's life, and he gains the royal favor as a result of this. And this is going to be a huge problem later on. The war in 1904 that is going to break out with Russia is going to be between Russia and Japan. And Nicholas II is going to be gung-ho on this. He thinks this is a way for him to prove himself. However, the Russians are going to be continually defeated. And there's a lot of frustration on the part of the Russian people because of this. Why are we continuing to get into wars that we can't win? A group of protesters will march to the Winter Palace where the Tsar and his family were. And they set up a bunch of hymns and pictures of the Tsar and say prayers and kind of send about a petition to try and get Nicholas to withdraw from this war that was being very costly to the Russian people. And this is going to lead to an event called Bloody Sunday, because a shot is going to ring out. Nobody really knows which side it came from, if it came from the Russian people, if it came from the soldiers protecting the Winter Palace. Nobody's really sure, but this shot rings out, and so the soldiers open fire on the crowd. And it's this event, this Bloody Sunday, that's going to kill the people's faith and trust in the Tsar, that he wasn't willing to listen to reason and basically was willing to kill them in order to gain his goals, kind of thing. So that begins the first Russian Revolution in 1905. There's a bunch of strikes and revolts and uprisings that will take place. The people will write something called the October Manifesto, in which they talked about freedom of the person, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, union of people. They summoned a Duma, and a Duma is an elected national legislature whose job it is to approve all laws, not just the Tsar's job. And so the first Duma is going to be set up in order to satisfy the people, but it's dissolved by the Tsar because it was criticizing his way of governing, so it doesn't last very long. In order to make the people happy, though, because he gets rid of the Duma, Nicholas II is going to appoint Peter Stolypin as prime minister. Now, Stolypin was not a noble. He was a regular Russian person, so he thought that would maybe appease the people. And so Peter Stolypin is going to try to restore order in Russia. He arrests people who are continuing to revolt. He issues orders for pogroms and executions. But he also realizes that there is a need for reform, because otherwise they're going to keep going down the same path. And so he tries to put forth some land reforms and education reforms as well. Now, there will be several Dumas that will follow, but they're restricted by some new voting laws that are passed by the Tsar, very conservative voting laws that they can only vote certain ways, sort of thing, so very restrictive for them. The second revolution, or the next revolution, will happen right after that. Basically, you have kind of two revolutions that are going on at the same time. In 1913, it's the 300th anniversary of the Romanov dynasty. And so there's a lot of different celebrations that are happening because this family has been in charge for 300 years. But there's also a lot of revolutionary thinking going on because this family's been in charge for 300 years. And so there's a lot of thinking on maybe we don't need these people anymore, or maybe they're not really thinking about our best interests anymore. World War I will break out in 1914, and this is going to fire up national pride. It actually unites the Russians together because now they have a common foe in Germany. And this war that they enter into is going to strain the Russian resources. The factories could not keep up with the supplies. Transportation systems sort of break down. There really was not enough rifles or ammunition or medical care to support or sustain this war with Germany, and they're very poorly led. By 1915, Russia had 2 million casualties and another 2 million were wounded. So it takes a very heavy cost to them. Now, Nicholas II goes to the front in order to try and rally the Russian spirit and get his troops to be dominant and win over Germany. But he is not a competent general. He makes some very bad, poorly decided decisions, and he really shows that he's not meant to lead troops in battle. But when he goes to the front, he leaves the domestic affairs to his wife, Alexandria. And so she's in charge back home, kind of thing, keeping up the government and that kind of stuff. Now remember, she's German, and the Russians were fighting Germany in World War I. And so there's not a whole lot of trust for her. She knows very little about government. She never really cared to learn, and so now she's trying to make do. And so she relies on the advice of Gregory Rasputin. Remember that she's following his cult. Now, he's a peasant. He's uneducated himself. He doesn't know how to run a government either. And the people were very untrustworthy of him having so much control over her anyway. In 1917, in February, she passes a law that will require bread rationing. So only a certain amount of bread given to each family. Cutting back on food supplies. This is not going to go over well in the winters of Russia because they need food. So on March 8th, which was International Women's Day, there's going to be a peace and bread demonstration outside of the palace. And on March 10th, everyone goes on strike. The soldiers who had come back because they were injured or they were off the front or whatever, they were told by Alexandria and Rasputin that if the people don't go back to work, shoot them. And the army refuses to do this. And in fact, they joined the strike as well. They said, screw this, we're not going to be in the army. By March 12th, the provisional government, the Duma, has become the Russian parliament. It is in charge. And by March 15th, the Tsar is out. He abdicates, which means he gives up his power and runs away. His family is caught later and are assassinated, all of them. It's the whole entire family. It's all the children and some of their servants even. And so that kind of leaves them with the question of, okay, now what do? We got rid of our Tsar, who was in charge of us for over 300 years. So now what kind of a government do we want?